Here's the thing about first impressions. They are not always the indication of things to come, especially from Disney. This is kind of the reason I don't watch just one episode of a series before making a final judgment on whether or not the series is right for me. I also never do the one glimpse at a promotional material and think the series or movie is going to be bad. I gave shows like Teen Titans Go and Regular Show a chance and then decided for myself that I didn't care for this. Not the opinions of other people, because seriously, we're not lemmings who follow the pack. Unless you're into politics. Don't let other people tell us what we can determine on our own what is good and what isn't. However, when it comes to trailers for a movie or show or cartoon, they're trying to convince people to watch it. At times, a trailer can make or break a series, Whitney. But sometimes, even just the name of the series can make you think, what the heck were they thinking? I'm not going to lie and say that's what happened with the show in question. But I will tell you, someone at one point was thinking it. But despite the title of the series, what we got and what could have been out of a simple idea made history for Disney television animation. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages. Hello friends, I'm Toonamp, and this is the history of Disney's Adventures of the Gummy Bears. So what is the story of how this show came to be? Were there endless meetings and brainstorming sessions?
Oh, no, I wouldn't say that.
So a little background. At this point, the Disney Television Animation Studio was in its infancy, and the heads and creators were not allowed to use iconic Disney characters when making new series. So Mickey, Donald, and Goofy were off the table. So they had to come up with their own ideas and build shows from the ground up. But they also had free reign to be as creative as they wanted. Heck, Disney still does this to this day when it comes to most of their television properties. So one of the creators of the Gummy Bear series, Art Vitello and Jim Magon, were told by Michael Eisner to make a series based off of a chewable candy because Michael Eisner's kids liked them. You can guess they were kinda taken off guard. But Eisner was persistent in this pursuit, and the creators were still allowed free reign to create not only the characters that we've grown to love, but also the world these characters exist in. So basically, Eisner. Make a show off of Gummy Bears, but do whatever you want with them. You can see a lot of influences of other series in Gummy Bears. There's traces of Smurfs, Dungeons and Dragons. Their stuff was even influenced by Miyazaki. What was something that was brushed off as a joke turned into a show about magic, intrigue, and mystery in a medieval land. It goes to show you, no matter how dumb you think an idea is, there is a possibility that it could become something great. Or it could end up like this.
Oh, I'm a gummy bear. Yes, I'm a gummy bear.
Calvin is an orphan who is a page in the Dunwin army, often ridiculed for believing his grandfather's tales of gummy bears. Calvin found himself face to face with the legendary creatures after being attacked by ogres led by the evil Duke Igthorn. Calvin discovers the mysteries of the gummies, which includes helping to unlock the mystic Great Book of Gummy. He also discovers the gummy bears' secrets of the gummy berry juice, which makes gummy bears bounce and humans strong. He gains the gummy bear's trust and forms a bond with the youngest of the gummies, Cubby. Later in the series, the Dunwin princess, Princess Kala, discovers and befriends the teenage Sunny Gummy. Still hiding in the shadows, the gummies along with Calvin and Kala fight to defend Dunwin from the evils of Duke Igthorn, Lady Vane, and other creatures. Along the way, they discover new gummies, ancestral lands, and finally revealing themselves to the Dunwin King, King Gregor, the father of Princess Kala.
After all these years, face to face with other gummy bears.
We'll be able to share all sorts of history and knowledge.
And I'll make them a big batch of my special Wuzzle-Nut brownies.
You do, and they'll declare war.
There was a lot of worry from the television department when Disney was developing the series. Since the animation was not considered up to par compared to Disney films and shorts, the creators considered not putting Disney's name on it. So in case things didn't work out with the series, Disney would not be identified as the creators. I don't know how they would have been able to have done that, but then again, all original characters, and people do tend to forget that Snookums and Meat were a Disney property, so they might have been able to pull it off. But they kept the Disney name and moved forward. Now here was the tricky part. Due to the fact that television animation is done cheaper, Disney needed to find a way to make the series look good. Well, better than the current stuff on Saturdays. Most of you know the story by now. As with most animated series in the 80s and 90s, the animation was done overseas while everything else was done in-house. I doubt Disney is the first studio to do this, but thanks to the Gummi Bears, it did start a revelation where animation started to look so much better on Saturdays compared to 10 years from when the Gummi Bears first aired. And yeah, everything was beautiful in this series, from the character animation to the backgrounds. This became the standard bearer for Disney for the next 12 years until one Saturday morning began. Also, whoever designed Gummi Glen with the glass ceiling at the bottom of a lake and the quick cars, yeah, pissed me off because I want to visit that and I know they don't exist in real life. Disney parks, get on that.
Look, Molly, a monkey.
Filthy, disgusting creature. Take that, and that, and that.
Industrious toady. Got to find another line of work.
Stop playing around.
Like with most Disney themes, the Gummi Bears theme song is iconic. Composers Michael Silversher and Patricia Silversher did an excellent job of explaining who the Gummies are, and the song helps build the world around them. And the visuals are great too, as they include clips from the show, as well as original animation. It's a really fun and iconic song. Add the fact that Jimmy Fallon had Alicia Keys sing the song on his show, shows you how important the song is in the cartoon theme song history. The background music, on the other hand, while fitting for the series, giving a charm and adding to the environment, unfortunately doesn't really stand out. If it's inserted into another show, well, you're not going to be able to tell that it came from the Gummi Bears. Not like the background music from Rescue Rangers and the New Adventures of Winnie the Pooh. Now don't get me wrong, it's still good music.
These friends of yours?
Friends? Well, I wouldn't exactly call them friends.
Thornberry!
Right, of course they're friends.
Well, then.
The Adventures of the Gummi Bears will return after these messages.
Take a wild ride to Disney's all-new magical world.
Wow! Gummi Bears!
Disney's Adventures of the Gummi Bears. Saturday morning.
Who came up with the idea of two creatures combining into one? It looks to be an Eisner idea. I can't get into too much detail because I can't find the details on how the Wuzzles were created.
Isn't that cute? But it's wrong!
This was back on my Wuzzles video. While doing research for this video, I stumbled upon more information on how the Wuzzles came about, and how Disney ended up partnering with Hasbro. In an interview, Tad Stones, the man responsible for Darkwing Duck, stated that even before Eisner, Disney was interested in going into television. This is because the consumer product division of Disney wanted to make more products. The problem is, movies came out every few years, so they wanted a toy line that was consistent. So Jim Magon and Gary Crystal developed an idea for a land where the trade winds crossed and the animals were crossed as well. This series was to be called Jumble Isle. The two started pitching the idea to different toy companies to see if there was any interest. However, one of these companies left the room a wee bit after the pitch started. That company was Hasbro. Hasbro contacted Disney to explain that they had the exact same idea and was going to go ahead with the toy line the following spring. So instead of fighting with Hasbro, the two companies decided to work together. This explains why both Disney and Hasbro share the same copyright to the Wuzzles.
And now back to Disney's Adventures of the Gummi Bears.
What is that?
I know get squash. I know get squash. I know.
One of the reasons why Gummy Bears is one of the more fondly remembered Disney series is the fact that the cast gelled so well together. With maybe the exception of one or two characters, the Gummies, the humans, the ogres all had this wonderful chemistry together. Each of the Gummies had their roles fleshed out from the beginning. Zummy is the wise but forgetful grandfather who has a fascination with magic. Grammy, who might be considered the head of Gummy Glen, is the ill-tempered mothery figure who is in charge of the Gummy's secret but powerful recipes. Gruffy, he's the father figure. He is set in tradition, but is not afraid to try something different when backed into a corner. By the way, Grammy and Gruffy are kind of a Rocky and Bullwinkle reunion, considering June Foray played Rocky and Grammy, and Bill Scott played Bullwinkle and Gruffy. Unfortunately, Scott passed away before the second season started recording. Scott also provided the voices for Toadwart and Sir Tuxford. Voice actors Corey Burton took over the roles of Gruffy and Toadwart, and both Roger C. Carmel and Brian Cummings took over the role of Sir Tuxford. There was the laid-back teenager Tummy Gummy, who was played by the great Lorenzo Music of Garfield fame. So, Tummy likes to eat. No! Music wasn't typecast at all, right? Ghostbusters. Maybe he was typecast a little? There's the preteen Sunny Gummy, who is kind of the embodiment of 80s teenage girls in a medieval setting. You know, fashion boys. And then there's the youngest, Cubby Gummy, who dreams of being a knight and going on adventures. And of course, being the youngest, he's friends with a human, Calvin. Calvin, it's Calvin. I keep calling him Calvin for some reason. Is Cubby his Hobbs? Unlike a lot of unnecessary humans, Calvin and Princess Calla feel less forced into the series and aren't pushed into the background. The reason why I call characters like this unnecessary humans is because for the most part, they tend to be used for 1 or 2 episodes and then regulated to, hey, I still exist moments, or overtake the main focus of the show to the point where they get more development than the main characters, and the main characters are then pushed to the back. This is the problem with the original My Little Pony. Gummy Bears didn't do this with Calvin and Calla. And while Calvin can be just there at times, and Calla can be a little prissy, they are still important to the series, and add something to the Gummy Bears dynamic. Unlike Gusto Gummy, this guy. One of the major themes of Gummy Bears is family. However, Gusto always felt like the odd Gummy out. Gummy Bears came out at an interesting time as a close companion series, and when I say that, I mean the show was on the same network and was set in the medieval times, was starting to add new characters to make the show feel fresh. That series being Smurfs, and they started doing the introduction of a new character each year starting in 1985. So at the end of season 2, Gummy Bears decided to do the same thing by introducing Gusto. The problem is, during the 3rd season, we didn't get to see Gusto again until the 4th episode. After that, Gusto was featured occasionally? It is understandable since he lives outside of the Glen. But there are points in this series where it does seem that he is only there to undermine Gruffy. Gusto is an artist and inventor, and he's relatable to the younger Gummies. He is an interesting character, but I wonder if the reason why he was introduced to the series is because Disney wanted it, or was it NBC? Now the main villains of the series, Duke Igthorn and his ogres. They are great comic relief villains. You can look at them as the Three Stooges. Igthorn is Mo, Toadwart is Larry, and the rest of the ogres are Curly. I get some of the best laughs out of these guys. But there's also the fact that Igthorn can be a legitimate threat. In a way, he is a lot like Captain Hook. Hook is great for comedy, but he is a legitimate threat to Peter Pan. Igthorn is always scheming, always plotting, he's kidnapping, he's always trying to steal or take advantage of the Gummy Bear's secrets. And Toadwart, being the yes man, is also the most abused character in the series. Not only by the Gummies and Igthorn, but by the other ogres as well. He's the perfect number 2. The ogres serve their purpose of being easily deceived, but they prove to be some of the best comedy in the series as well, especially when it comes to wordplay. There are other characters. You have the naive king and his right-hand man, you have the doubters, but they aren't important. As always, the characters make this series, but with the setting and location, everything mixes so well together, it's no wonder the series lasted for 6 seasons.
There, your dukishness! We come for reward!
You have you?
Oh, not very nice reward.
Here is something I found interesting when doing my research for this series. I discovered a few blogs and news articles stating that the gummy bears are forgettable and average. If that is the case, why are we still talking about the series 35 years later? Why did we freak out when the new DuckTales referenced it? If gummy bears are forgettable, why when it was announced that I was doing this History of Disney Television Animation series, did I get so many requests to review Gummy Bears? Gummy Bears is far from forgettable. The show has an audience. I remember reading a letter and TV guide in 1996, a few weeks after the magazine released their parents' guides to kids' TV and the top 10 best cartoons. The letter stated that the cartoons featured in the magazine would not be as famous or as memorable as Yogi Bear, Bugs Bunny, or Rocky and Bullwinkle. Yeah, those magazines had Animaniacs, X-Men, Spider-Man, Batman, Power Rangers, Rugrats, Aladdin the series, The Tick, Gargoyles, and Freakazoid. All cartoons that are as beloved today as they were back in '96. This is why I do not say a new cartoon is going to be forgettable, because the past has shown that the people who say this have been proven wrong. This is the power of nostalgia. 35 years from now, people are going to still be talking about Adventure Time and Gravity Falls. They still will be talking about Avatar: The Last Airbender and the 2012 Ninja Turtles. Why? Because they grew up with them. And us older fans appreciate that these series were well done. So when someone says that a series like Gummy Bears is forgettable, the question has got to be asked, is it forgettable to you or to the rest of the world? Because the rest of the world says you're wrong. And if it is forgettable, then why are you talking about it? The series lasted for 6 seasons with 65 episodes. It lasted for 4 years on NBC and then moved to ABC to be part of the Gummy Bears Winnie the Pooh Hour, before moving to weekday afternoons to be a bookend for the Disney afternoon. It makes it one of the longest running Disney series ever. In fact, it's tied for first place with Recess for the most seasons. Yes, Phineas and Ferb had more episodes per season and had new episodes airing for 8 years, but it was still only renewed 3 times. Gummy Bears in Recess was renewed for 5. It doesn't help that Disney tends to spread their episodes out more nowadays, unless your name is DuckTales or part of Disney Junior.
Guess I'm a little nervous.
That's not nerves. It's Igthorn!
Speaking of selling toys, much like the Wuzzles, Gummy Bears is another show that was intended to sell toys. Unlike Wuzzles, which we explained earlier on in this review, in which Disney was partnered with Hasbro, Disney licensed the show to Fisher-Price, and were not partners with them. You had plushies, you had figures, puzzles, and books. Pretty much the same old stuff that every series was getting at the time. Thank you, Care Bears. Even now we get collectibles of the series. Unfortunately, there weren't any villains for your gummy toys to bounce on in any of the toy lines. Not unless you modify a Captain Hook figure to look like Igthorn.
Perfect! Now if I can just hide these from Tommy. What in the...
Hey! Thanks, Grumpy.
It's fair to say that Disney television series have taken a back seat at Disney parks nowadays, with the main focus on the characters from the old Disney shorts and the movies, and intellectual properties that Disney bought over the years. Star Wars, it still doesn't feel like Disney. You can bring Darth Vader in as many times as you want to your parks, but it still doesn't feel like Disney because he wasn't created by them. With the exception of Disney Junior Series, because money, and characters that they already had costumes for. Back in the 80s and 90s, this wasn't the case. You could see the gummy bears in the parks. They were part of the parades. They even had their own ride. Sure, it was a reconfigured Disneyland boat ride with plywood cutouts, but still, the series was being noticed at the parks. Unlike most series today, we have Disney princesses that are being ignored, except for the preschool ones, because money. We have no Star Butterfly, no Dipper Pines. Disney is very selective about who they feature in the parks, and unfortunately, they are leaving behind a lot of possibilities in favor of what sell toys. Again, the reason why Disney Junior exists. In 1993, the motorboat cruise to Gummy Glen closed permanently due to the creation of Toontown.
Professor, I just heard the boat ride at Disneyland is gone!
Why?
While Wuzzles will be known as the other show that began Disney's television animation, Gummy Bears will be remembered as the show that started Disney's television animation. A show that lasted beyond the 6 seasons that it aired. It introduced the concept that animation series could look fantastic and not stiff if given the right resources. This show is one of the pioneers, along with a handful of others, of what we recognize as the definitive style of animation in the 1980s and early 90s because it set trends. It is one of the few series from the 80s that has a beginning and an ending. Smurfs are still lost in time, by the way. You can call it unremarkable and forgettable all you want, but that does not take away of how important this series is. I'm Toonamp. Thanks for watching.
Make the sunshine. Color in a shrinky-dink, cut out a shrinky-dink. Then Mom bakes it and right before you ride, your shrinky-dink shrinks right down to size.
Like magic. Fabulous, fantastic.
Then it's up to you what your shrinky-dinks do.
Shrinky Dinks collector sets. You can collect them all.
Shrinky-dinks make the fun shine.
By Color Forms.